Hello, welcome to Onionskin. This was originally a piece made for a friend's birthday, but I wanted to show it to you as well because it's an interesting demonstration in hybrid animation, particularly rigging as you go, right? So sort of entering the process under the impression that's going to be fully traditional, but identifying the moments where you could potentially save time and a little bit of energy by using the flexibility that Harmony provides. So at first you can see that I did a full rough pass traditionally. I was just able to think about movement and expression and acting, all that sort of stuff. But when it came to the cleanup phase, one, the bucket is drawn on its own layer, and then this head, because it's perfectly circular, right? I just drew the circle once and then was able to shift it with a peg into the right place. However, I wanted to embrace the imperfections that traditionally naturally provides us. Using a perfect circle wouldn't fly for this. Particularly moments like this smear frame you can see here where it's sort of like stretching. Placed an envelope around that head. So now not only was I able to place it into, stop motion style from place to place, but I could also stretch it as such as well. But here's an interesting frame where you can see that simply trying to squish it down that far, it's kind of pushing it. So made the executive decision, no, now it needs to be a new drawing because this first phase of the animation where this like bulge is like emerging and then sort of like squishing and tremoring and sort of like vibrating a little bit, that can be its own shape with its own deformer, and I can get quite a lot of flexibility out of that very, very quickly. Now, could I have done this by drawing it? Yeah, of course. But I feel like I probably will be able to save a little bit of time here as well. With these like little stretch marks in the middle, similar deal, they are single lines. I could have put a curve deformer on it, but you do that with eyebrows and stuff all the time, but they're only on screen for like 3 or 4 frames. So frankly, it was quicker in that aspect for me to just grab it with the black arrow or the white arrow and just straight up bend it on a vector level. It's very similar to using a curve deformer anyway. I just have to keep an eye on drawing substitutions instead of keyframes, which is fine. So there are a lot of different methods at play here. Yeah, like maybe I'm overdoing it in certain places. Maybe I'm making the wrong judgment. But the idea is that it's a deliberate area to kind of experiment and play in. I'd encourage you to make just a short animation like this, something that you only spend like an hour on, and try to include as many different methods as possible. And just pay attention to how you feel about each one. Like, what speaks to you? What do you kind of hate? What kind of feels like a really nice way of doing things? Like here again, you can see this body is just sort of this like blob with envelopes on it, and I was able to sort of stretch and move it all the way along. There's a lot of misconceptions with deformers and cutout-based animation in general, where it tends to just end up looking riggy all the time because there is an over-reliance on interpolated movement. Forget all that. Look what I'm doing here. It's fancy cleanup. I had a full hand-drawn rough pass, and rather than having to have really super accurate lines and pressing Control-Z 1,000 times before I finally got the stroke correct, I was able to just mold this thing like clay directly over the top of my sketch lines. I didn't have to think about the way that tweens and function curves and all that sort of junk works. I'm just tracing with my blob. And I duplicated it there to sort of like build this middle part of the chest as well. That'll save a little bit of time. But yeah, we're sort of animating with a bit of a stop motion animator's perspective. Every frame is deliberately placed, and then there's very little guesswork, and then it's not going to look puppety in the end. It's a pretty one-to-one in the final result on if I had gone full rig or full hand-drawn, and I'm just trying to make good judgments on when is the best way to go, one or the other. And here we enter a very interesting example of probably when I tried to overdo it. I'm making up a whole heap of layers, all for the face. How is the face going to move around inside this big circular head? Well, first I procrastinate from that by doing the hand on the arm. This is a good example, actually. The hand is its own layer that just sort of sits there. Because I know where the shoulder is going to be on any given frame, it was frankly easier, I thought, to just go full traditional on the arm. I'm just sort of bend it. But I'm not going a full brand new drawing every time. I've got a vectorized piece, just like 2 or 3 strokes. duplicating that drawing, and then using tools like the white arrow with the perspective tool with the black arrow, I am twisting and moving the vector strokes to deliberately where I want them to be. And then when the arm bends a little bit too far, well, I have the option to just straight up do a brand new drawing then. You could see me as well using invisible strokes to sort of patch in the shoulder to get that going. But I'm really curious as to, like, what do you call this method where you're animating by duplicating and bending shapes around? Because you're sort of working with like a cutout animator's mindset, right? Because you're posing shapes, you're not doing new drawings, but everything is flat. It's on one layer. I've heard a few different methods. Some people call it pseudo rigging or wet vector. Sounds gross, but okay. Yeah, is there an actual term for this yet? We should coin one if there isn't. But back to the face. This was a really tricky puzzle because some parts of it are fully encapsulated by the face and some bits like the nose and the eyebrows are not. So do I lean on cutters and masking to have things encapsulate inside? Or do I sort of just like eyeball it? On this attempt, you can see I deliberately make the sort of like muzzle of the mouth deliberately bigger than the head, so there's a little bit of play to move it around with a peg on the inside. And then the teeth inside of that. I thought about having the teeth masked inside the muzzle area as well, but then it turned out to be easier for that all to be flat. The eyes as well, you can see that both eyes are together on a single flat plane as well, rather than separating it out into two eyes and two pupils as well. So things are broken down a little bit, but I didn't go crazy. But now I need to be a bit careful with the bits that overlap and the bits that don't. We've got the eyebrows, they stick outside the head, so they need to be separate. But here you can see the face is masked inside the rest of the head. The head is moving around, the face wasn't, so it had to be parented properly. And now you can see I'm really trying to mess with like, how on earth do I twist this assembly around in order to have it look completely up at the sky right like that? It was ridiculous. I bit off way more than I could chew there. It was a little bit silly, so I wound it right back again, and we went for a hand-drawn. I was on my own. Went for the hand-drawn frame by frame mouth on its own layer, and basically hand-drawn frame by frame eyes on their own layer for the most part as well. And going that route just meant that I probably only had to do redraws every 4 or 5 frames as opposed to every 2. So I was able to save on quite a bit of drawing that way. But I am definitely on the fence as to whether or not I save time based on the failed experiment beforehand. But that's okay. Like, this was a short project where I was deliberately experimenting with a few methods to sort of feel out what sort of worked and what didn't, all with the end goal of just making sure that it was done with the simple deadline of before birthday. So maybe that's something that you want to try as well. Simple little hobby projects that you only sit down with for a couple of hours. But if it's for someone, if it's a gift, then you're more likely to finish it rather than, get 10% of the way in and then bail for something more shiny. I find one of the best ways of going about that route is if it is like in the middle of a group chat. If someone says something funny and you don't have the perfect gif, challenge yourself to try and animate something then and there, like before the topic changes. You got 10 minutes, maybe less. It's probably just going to be a 3-frame little doodle of something just like jostling back and forth super fast. Hey, we're going to be competing with AI soon. We need to animate faster than you can type in a text prompt. Go, do a little jiggle. Why not? Yeah, look at it go. Anyway, jeez. It's done. Matt resized add a white stroke to the outside as a little bit of compositing. And there we go. Nice little fun loop. Hello V, I hope you are well.